Okay, let's call the meeting of the Andover Board of Finance for September 28th to order at 7:02 PM. First item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. So, pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Dun-dun-dun. Nobody heard this before, but I have a massive headache, so I'm going to try to move the meeting along really quickly. If I get off track, you can just put me back on track, or if I talk gibberish, you can put me back on track because I can't think straight because my head is killing me. All right, public speak. We have Colin McNamara on, and he wanted to say hello to us. He is the new superintendent for RAM.
Yeah, hey, you got it. I don't know if you saw my email that I sent earlier
did,
today.
Quickly. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So good evening, everyone. My name, as the chair said, my name is Colin McNamara. I'm the new superintendent for RAM. The purpose for me attending this evening is to simply introduce myself. My goal in starting, I started in July 1, and my goal is to make sure that I can be out there and meet people who are associated with a district, and certainly elected officials in the towns of Andover, Hebron, and Marlboro amongst that group. While I'm new to the district, I know that there is a strong commitment in each of the three towns to support the middle school and the high school students at RAM. And I look forward to working with you and members of the board, for members of all the boards from the different towns. And I would just encourage any of you to reach out to me directly if you have any questions or concerns. I just felt it was important to say hi and for give you an opportunity to put a face and a voice, even through the virtual environment, to the name, and just wanted to pop in and say hello. That's it.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Colin.
Nice to put a voice and a face together.
Good to meet you.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, my contact information is available on our district website. If there's issues, concerns, questions that any of you might have with some of the stuff that's going on related to RAM, don't hesitate to reach out to me at any time.
Thank you. Very admirable. Nice meeting you.
Pleasure meeting you all in a virtual environment. With that, I'm gonna say my goodbyes. It's actually my birthday today. I'm not looking for soliciting things, but I've got my family upstairs, and we're doing a little bit of a celebration. But I just wanted to again just say hello and look forward to working with you all in the future. Okay.
Okay.
Happy 25th.
Nice to meet you.
I love the 25th. Wishful thinking, but thanks, guys.
Right.
Have a great night. Take care. Be well.
Thanks. Bye-bye. All right, I don't see any other members of the public on there. I see one iPhone trying to join. I don't know who that is.
Does Kurt have an iPhone?
I don't
think so.
know, but it's not
I
showing the
have
phone
no
number.
idea.
It's just saying. So let's move on. Does anybody have any additions or deletions to the agenda items?
We got a pretty packed agenda here
All right.
already.
All right, we're good with that. Okay, let's move to the town administrator's report. Eric?
Okay, I'm going to go really brief. I'm not going to really say much other than what's already in the report. We are working on installing the electric charging stations now. I'm hoping we get those in the next week or so. They're just trying to fine tune the Ethernet connection for it. I do have a new admin assistant, Kate Morrissey, that has started. So if you have questions, you can reach out to either me or her. She keeps the same admin assistant email as before. I had given all of you a copy of the proposed contract for Nathan Jacobson. If any of you do have feedback on that for myself or the Board of Selectmen, let me know, and I'd be happy to incorporate that. We are basically done for the year with paving and then shimming and chip sealing, other than we do have a little bit more sweeping to do, but our sweeper's broken at the moment. So we're in the process of getting that fixed and back on the road, and then we'll finish sweeping the roads that need it. We were able to work again with Eversource this year. I put a breakdown in the packet of what our costs were this year for tree work. And we listed both the money we paid out of the capital budget, the capital tree removal fee, and then just an estimate of what our salary costs are for the project. So just so you can get a feel for it, because we end up doing traffic control to hold our contract costs down. We incur a bunch of salary and labor expense. So the RFP for the community center is really close. Adrian's gotten contributions for a bunch of people. We've reached back out to Rob, the civil engineer who was doing the site work. He's got to provide us some final documentation. And Adrian is just making the last of the corrections, but we've got a pretty good document that's basically ready to go to RFP for the design build. We are just about done with the majority of the connectivity grant project. The parking area at Center Street has been paved. Almost all of the signage is up. The kiosk is up. The fencing is up. So we're waiting for some grass to grow. And then we've got some little details. We got to paint the lines for the parking area. Redo the blinds for the parking area at the library since we screwed them up doing the initial construction. And then that basically wraps up that project. We are planning on doing a ribbon cutting for that on October 15th, which is a Saturday at 9 a.m. So you're all cordially invited to that. There are going to be some things we're going to wrap up. We have a little bit of money left over. So there's a couple things that we're contemplating doing. One of them is making the walking track at the Andover Veterans Field actually handicapped accessible, because now it's hard for people to get to the track if they have limited mobility. But as soon as we do that, then we got to provide handicapped parking spots. So we're still cost estimating that, but it looks like we have enough funding left over from that grant. And since that's all in the same area and it's definitely a connectivity project, there shouldn't be a problem with spending, that's in the realm of what that grant money was for. I sent a note to the board. So we haven't got the full second allotment for the American Recovery Act funding. We got the initial $160,000, which was the second half of the initial allotment that was directly geared towards the town. The rest of the money would ordinarily have gone to the counties, but since Connecticut doesn't have counties, that money gets transferred directly to the state. We have been told that we should get that the first week of October. So that will get us back to our it's around $480,000 in the second allotment. We still have basically the full tranche. So we have just under $1 million dedicated for the senior/community center. So that's that. And that's basically all I have, unless you guys have questions for me about projects or whatnot.
Any questions?
Shoot,
for
Eric,
Couple quick questions. I know that My Roads is one of the roads that was chip sealed, I guess it is, right? With the sweeper will be coming back eventually. I know that it's broken or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna say this. I say this as something I don't know a lot about, and I've mentioned it to a couple of people in passing. What did you do to Bear Swamp before they put that dust on it? I was okay with it then. It felt like it was partially paved in a lot of areas.
Right.
Which
So,
improved. Yeah.
so the first thing we do to it is what's called shimming or scratch shimming. And that is you use a pavement, you use asphalt that does not have a really big aggregate in it. And you use it to reshape and recontour the road where you have dips and you have really bad sections of pavement that's alligator. And you feather it because you don't want a sharp bump. The only other way to do it is do what's called keying it, which means you actually cut a strip about 4 feet wide, the width of the road, down about 2 inches, so so you can pave without having a big bump. When you shim with pavement that thin, you have to cover it with something, or it's not going to hold. In a year or two, it'll break off. Then you'll be back to having a bumpy road with the problems you had before. So what
Thank you.
chip
I
seal
don't want
does-
to ask too, I know Diana has a headache, so I don't want to make this a big long. But so thank you. You know, I do like to learn that. So that was part one of what you were gonna, because I was happy with that. I, don't mind
Right.
saying there was a lot filled in. It looked pretty good. It didn't look perfect, but all right, so
Yeah.
that was part one. I understand. It seems like this will take a while to. This is probably the first time I don't like our road, with all the roads talk that we've been in. This is like my worst. But I am told by people that understand it, it will get better.
Yeah, it will. And we play a balancing act between the quality of the aggregate we use and the cost. And believe it or not, if you use really high quality aggregate that's triple washed and it's sized so that all the particles are basically 3/8 of an inch, it doesn't lay down as flat in the end as when you use a mix that is a cheaper stone mix that also has much smaller particles and dust in it. Because that gets down into the cracks, it works its way into the emulsion, and you end up with a flatter surface in the end. But in the meantime, you deal with a lot more dust. And frankly, I get a lot more complaints from people than when we use the double washed. But in the long run, we get less complaints. Like 6 months out, we get less complaints because you have a smoother surface. And I don't get all the complaints about, I can't walk my dog on it because it's too rough and my kids
I
can't
can't
skateboard
walk,
on it.
yeah, like just going for a walk, there's like, your eyes are just full of dust. And I get the dust part. I even mean the surface part. So I'll give it time. I think I've seen the process before and it seemed to work a little bit better. No, thank you for that. You're always willing to give. And then just a quick one on the, you're always willing to give an explanation. I have to finish. I'm so quick. I don't finish thoughts a lot. The next is just, you said, so the track at Veterans Park, also down the road, is it, and I'm all about handicap accessibility and all of that. I understand that, but for people that would want to use it that are handicapped, is it hard to, I'm not understanding. I feel like it's open, and even if you wanted to push someone in a wheelchair or something, could you get in there? I didn't know.
Yeah, the problem is there's no easy access to the path because the gate goes, the rail fence goes all the way around. There's a gate, but the gate is normally locked because it's a 10-foot wide gate and we don't want people driving cars on it. So we either have to unlock the gate and then risk, kids doing donuts on the field, which has been a problem in the past. Or we basically put in a second pedestrian entrance that's about 4 feet wide. We do have to change some of the not the split rail, but the heavy timber post. We have to add a couple of posts, dig them in and then just pave a very short pathway. But the problem is as soon as you claim something is handicapped accessible, then you trigger the rules. And then you have to make it essentially ADA accessible. So you have to, instead of using chip seal there or just the millings that's there, we do have to pave a little square that's essentially big enough for 1 or 2 handicapped vehicles to park. Not a big deal. We'll use the same contractor we use for shimming because he's a lot cheaper. And we probably would just have Public Works do the excavating because that's really fast. So I don't see this as being a big project. We're probably talking about 1 day of labor for our paving contractor. That's about $3,500. And then the cost of asphalt. So, and we'll only do it if we have the
Yeah.
money in the grant to pay for it.
Got it. Thanks.
Eric, if I could, you mentioned that you had sent around a copy of the contract for Nathan Jacobson. I don't see it in the packet. Did you email it? What did you do?
Yeah, I emailed it to the board a couple of weeks ago.
Oh,
At least
okay.
I thought I did.
You did. I'm pretty sure you did. This is the contract for services to help our finance department.
No, Nathan
Town
Jacobson
engineer.
is the
Oh.
the contract for town engineer.
Oh, sorry, I had the wrong thing, so now I'm not sure. Oh,
The
boy.
reason, the reason why I thought I sent it to the Board of Finance was because I wanted you, as you're debating the purchasing policy, since that contract, if it gets signed, has some stipulations and some cost thresholds on what we would have to go back out to RFP versus what we would just do as a matter of course. So I wanted you guys all to review it. I mean, it's the Board of Selectmen that signs it, but I wanted to give it to you guys to review. And I thought
I didn't find a copy of it. Maybe I misfiled it or something.
I'm not seeing it either.
well, then maybe I screwed up and didn't send you a copy. It's entirely possible.
Anybody else got it? Because I don't see it either.
I think I got it, but I did not at that time spend a lot of time looking at it because I was writing the purchasing policy. And I
Okay.
really kind of think of that as a,
So we could provide feedback separately, if the board, if we have any issues, but it'd probably be good to see that.
Yeah. Okay, so I will make a note to myself to send you a copy. So my apologies for not having sent you one already. I thought I had given all of you that.
No worries.
Okay.
Any other questions for Eric? Anybody else have anything else? Okey doke, let's move on to Finance Department report. You guys have a budget expenditure report and a revenue report. Neither one of them is correct, so based on our current situation, but I don't know if anybody has any questions or anything they want to go over on those things.
Just a comment, Diane, when you say, and I know you've been working closely with Jeff and Eric and trying to get this sorted out, but when you say not correct, I mean, is there any material discrepancies that we should be aware of?
The total amount on the expenditure report that says for our budget is not what our approved budget was. It's off by $133, which needs to be fixed.
That's
There-
not, yeah,
What
We're not
caused that?
talking thousands of dollars anywhere.
No, we do have in the finance section, the software was not set up correctly in the budget. So the software maintenance item under the treasurer financing is saying it says 0 for the adopted budget. It should be $2,200. That's
Okay.
missing out of the report.
Gotta get fixed.
I'm not spending a whole lot of time looking at this stuff now because
Yeah, that's fine. I didn't want to, I was just, as long as there's nothing that you guys are concerned about.
right.
just
Right. I mean, if there's a flashing red emergency, some massive discrepancy, I think that's what we're
I'm
getting.
pretty confident you guys would have alerted it, but I just wanted to ask the question when you say it's not right, like how right, not right is it? So, okay. Good.
So, nothing. So put it this way, when we get to the discussion about the cure for all this, we will have answers for that for you. The revenue report is not right because there's no grand list. No revenue's been posted. The grand list item wasn't even set up in the budget right, so you'll see. I think the budgeted amount is blank, is 0 on it. That's a work in progress, but. So that's kind of where we are. As far as the items that are being booked as expenses in the report, they're from what I have gone through the system and they're pretty much correct. There's some things that we have to, fix, but so in essence, we're just, the accounts payable is getting posted, and that's about the only thing. So there's some things we need to fix on that. So any other questions? Everybody good? All right. Item 6 on here, we do have a transfer that we want to do in the packet, which will be our professional services that we want to put money aside for hiring someone to help us fix the finance department. So in essence, I think the Board of Selectmen has already made a motion in their meeting to move this money, but this meeting would be a formal meeting to do that. And I think Eric would have put a motion in our packet.
He did. He
Yeah, it's
did.
there.
There's suggested motions in there for transfers from the trooper fund and contingency, right?
Right, so we want to take the money we have left in the trooper fund and the money we have in contingency for last year, transfer them into the audit services line to have that money set aside to do our fix.
So I guess the question I would have before entertaining this motion is audit services the right line to move this to? Is there outside consulting row that would be more appropriate? This really isn't.
We don't actually, it is going to be audit services because we have to hire somebody to reconcile every one of our bank statements for last year.
Yeah, but that's accounting, right?
Right, so but we're hiring a CPA, kind of an
Yeah,
external.
but it's not that critical, but I wouldn't necessarily call it an audit. That
We don't
would be where you
have-
could skew it a little bit.
And a lot of this, and logically, there was no other place to put it right now because there's no professional services line. We want to
Okay.
use money from last year's budget because really the impetus out of this is coming from the last audit report from the auditor. One of the findings was for us to do a major overhaul of our accounting system. And this is
Yeah,
the money.
it's related. I get that, but the real findings, we all know that the books are not where they need to be. But okay, if there's no other, like, if we don't have a professional services line, then, then yeah, that's the most reasonable place to put it, I think. Or I would, it's not unreasonable. It's just something that is going to skew our audit line by a little bit. We just have to
Yes.
keep that in mind for the future.
And I'm going to tell you, in that audit line, part of the reason is that we still owe the auditor probably another $17,000 for last year's audit, so. So that's going to pay that too.
Seems a little dual purpose then.
Yeah.
Okay. So is this the point at which you want to make those motions or?
I would like to do that now. If anybody has any further questions about it or any concerns about the motion, we can address it, but if we could have a motion.
I guess we can always have discussion once the
Right.
motion is
Once the
underway.
motion's made, yeah.
Hang on, I just want to get it right and then I can make it. I'm just scrolling down to find the suggestion.
On page 20 of the packet.
The packet was there's a bit of an info dump in the middle of it.
Oh,
For goodness sakes, sorry. 20 you said. There it
20
is.
on my PDF, so.
Oh, that would
It's-
explain why I'm not.
No, it's page 20 on the PDF and on the meeting packet
Yeah,
distributed by the admin.
That's odd. All right, what I'm looking at, maybe I downloaded it strangely because
It's right after
found-
it's right after the financial statements, Rob.
yeah, I see that. Okay, anyway, if somebody else has it, just you guys do it because for some reason, what I'm looking at here is not matching up.
Yeah, I'll make the motion. So I'll motion that we transfer I'm sorry, $54,757.54 from budget line item 100-04-0403-375, resident state trooper, to line item 100-01-0105-320, which is audit services.
And I will second that motion. And for the record, I'm not a complete moron. I found it. It's on page 12 of 24 of what I opened.
Okay.
So I didn't download it. You see, I opened it. I just clicked on it. This is the same issue I think we were talking about before, where you get a different format if you download it properly.
Could be.
Sorry. Anyway, yes, I second that motion.
Any discussion on that motion? All
I
in
just
favor?
presume
Go
that that's the excess based on what we had, obviously, right? We ended up
Right.
quite a bit lower in the state trooper file, so
Right.
it lines up. I have no concerns about it.
And, you know, this plan that's been cooked up, I mean, it seems to have broad support. You know, the Board of Selectmen seems to be in. Diane, I'm guessing you think this is a good idea, that this is the fix?
Yes, I've met with this woman many hours, so.
You know, I have no expertise to bring to bear really, so I'm going to trust my subject matter experts. I've got nothing further.
I guess
Other
I was
questions?
gonna follow up with, this is the money that we anticipate using for the private consulting service, the woman to come in and, right, that was my only question.
So the sum of these two transfers we're gonna do are gonna be used for professional services, you know, for the audit findings.
Yep.
Fixing our books and paying the auditor what we owe him, the extra money we owe him because the audit was so labor intensive for them. We owe him another 17,000 above and beyond the 32 or 33,000 we budgeted for last year.
So in
we
the
have-
end, we're talking 50K for last year's audit.
Yep.
Okay.
All right, let's take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that's unanimous. And no abstentions? No nays. Okay, the second part of the motion is for the transferring the money from the contingency into the audit services line. Can I have a motion for that?
I'll go ahead and make that motion too. I motion to transfer $38,263.50 from budget line item number 100-13-1305-899 contingency to line item 100-01-0105-320 audit services.
Anybody have any
Second.
questions? Oops, any questions on that?
Need a second?
I did a second.
Second, Rob,
Okay,
second,
all right.
Rob, second.
We had a little cross
I
talk.
talked over him. No questions?
I'm good. I mean, it's the same purpose, so.
Yeah, same.
And
purpose.
and I think at this point, I guess the only issue is we don't believe we need contingency for anything else at this point.
Right.
Okay.
And we need this money. Will we use all this money? Probably not. So what will happen, it'll just roll into the general fund because once we close out last year. So, but we need to really kind of take these two pieces. These are the two pieces that had the biggest amount of money left over at the end of the year, last year.
We really lucked out with the trooper there.
Yeah, it really,
Yeah, we did.
yeah. Unanticipated, another windfall. But, yeah. So,
All right.
all right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, it's unanimous, no abstentions, no nays. All right, thank you everyone for that. Those are done. Let's go on to old business. Budget transfers, old business, okay.
Audit status.
Yeah, so, just so you know, the audit report has been issued. We had to do a corrective action plan and file it with the state. I, in conjunction with Eric, put together the correction action plan and Eric sent it on to the state. So that has been filed. The corrective action plan that I put together is the typical, very brief, yes, we agree, yes, we're gonna fix it, and we're gonna fix it by such and such a date. There's no detail in there, there's no plan written out for anybody, because I'm very used to responding to a formal audit that you only say, yep, we're gonna do it, and this is when we're gonna do it by it, and the details up to us behind the scenes to get it accomplished. So it's just very brief, short to the point, so we have nothing to come back and haunt us of what we said we were gonna do and we didn't do it, so so a lot of those dates got pushed out for the corrective action into December, January, and February. I consciously couldn't put a date out farther than February because I thought I would like die if I did that. So to get these things accomplished. So that's done. So we now going forward, we will then, I'll take these dates and the response that I put to the corrective action plan, and I'll drop it into that spreadsheet that we had for what the corrective action was from the auditor, and we'll put in what our response was and the due dates, and we'll track that every month so we can make sure we're meeting our target dates, and we'll just have oversight on that. And we'll make that a recurring thing to keep track of, because we can't afford not to hit our mark this time, because the state will come in and take us over. We'll be under their supervision because they really don't like what they see. So, so we'll do that. So that's that. Staff searches for the finance department, and Eric, you can chime in if you're there. You know, we've haven't had a whole lot of luck with the treasurer thing, you know. Not a lot of
Not
qualified.
at all.
Not at all. I just found we're gonna advertise, I think, for Marina's job. We probably should start that next week. We haven't done that yet because we were unsure about the roles and how to do that. Now that we're moving closer to hiring this professional person to come in and help us straighten things out, we're getting a lot more guidance about what the roles and responsibilities of a treasurer should be and a worker be in the office. So we'll get that going, but there's really no new news on that. So we're kind of, so really all we do right now is have Marina coming in, and she's just doing accounts payable and payroll. That's it. Nothing else is getting done. Any questions, anybody?
With respect to the search for a treasurer and the difficulties we're having, you know, if we're not getting applicants or what have you, I mean, we're advertising the position at a particular pay level, right?
Part-time. So, you know, so really our mark is a retired professional or somebody who's semi-retired, you know what I mean? Or someone who has a business on the side.
Right.
Or
I'm
shared
just saying-
services with another town department. That was an idea Eric came up with too, sharing a financial treasurer oversight with another town.
Yeah, I mean, I've had that very preliminary conversation with a couple other town managers of the surrounding towns. I think if we're at the point where we've got the financial department running well, if we get to the point where, you know, we've made the conversion of QuickBooks, we're functioning normally, the person that's in there on the day-to-day basis can handle the majority of the things, and the treasurer does some journal entries and does the monthly reconciliation, that's a low enough time requirement that I think we can get another finance director to do that on the side. I think, I don't know, but that would be my approach to trying to track down somebody for that. Or, I mean, ideally would be somebody who was a retired finance director of a local town that wanted to do it for, you know, a little bingo money. You know,
Okay. So your impression is that our hiring difficulties are as much about the scope of the job as they are about, you know, what we're willing to pay for it.
Well, number one, so the resumes that have come in that I looked at, there were virtually nobody qualified.
Okay.
There were kids who were just graduating with an accounting degree from UConn applying for the job. Do you know what I mean? And I think a lot of people who applied didn't realize it was a part-time job. Because you know, so some people didn't have any experience. Some are just getting accounting degrees. Some people had unrelated.
Do we need to rewrite the description to make it clearer?
Rewrite which
The
one?
reason I'm asking these questions is, I know it's tough right now to find, people we're hiring at my work, we're interviewing people, hand over fist. And, some of our screening that we've been having from HR has been struggling a little bit. We're getting like Applebee's waitresses, applying for a technical position. But that said, I just want to throw it out there, if we're having trouble attracting interest, I'm trying to get at what the problem might be. Is it because it's part-time? Is it because the hourly rate or what we're willing to pay is too low? What's going on? Because we may have, if we're not getting any nibbles, we got to change something, right?
It's not that we're not getting nibbles. It's just, we're
Okay,
not catching.
qualified
the fish we
applicants.
Want to catch.
Qualified
Um,
applicants. How's that?
Right. Yeah, and I do think the problem is that, if somebody is talented enough and qualified enough that they can do the job, the reality is they're already employed. So the only tooth we would have with them for this type of position, which is very part-time, would be somebody that did it but is now retired, and wants it as just like a side,
Yeah.
side thing for a little supplemental income, or somebody that's actively doing the job for a similar or ideally larger municipality that's either number one or number two in a finance department of a bigger town that wants to try to do it on the side. It seems like that's really our talent pool that we're looking for, and that's not a big pool. So it's not going to be something that's easy to track down.
Okay.
But we have a plan, which we'll talk about in executive session. Joanne.
Oh,
Sorry, I hope you're gonna be able, can you hear me?
Yes.
Computer issues.
Okay.
I just, what about the thought? I get that we've been at this for a while and trying to get someone employed in there that's gonna take hold, figure out what we need to do. We kind of just went through 2 years of that. Should we wait? I know we have to get a treasurer, we have to get a finance person, the marina position, but what about with this consultant coming in, looking at everything? And then I think from reading the contract or seeing it, they're actually going to maybe give us a plan of,
Oh, I did send you
Forward.
guys a copy of her proposal. Okay.
and my
Realis-
thought with that, my last thing, Diane, not to go on
Go
and
ahead.
on, is hopefully that person could see the amount of work that's in an office like an Andover and just say, I think you need a good person 2 days a week, once everything's up and running, that kind of thing. I
Right.
think
And
our problem throughout the years that I've watched, and it's been since I've lived here truthfully, but not all on this, this regime, is just getting a person in there to get it running, and it seems to be from the outside looking in. So kind of knowing what we need before we try to let's get with another town, let's do this, let's do that. I
Right.
feel like we really need this person to look at what happened.
and that's what she's going to do.
Fire
So
director that was gonna come in and just be like the savior, and I feel like in my tenure, we're in worse shape now.
So realistically, the big scope plan is to hire a highly qualified professional person to come in, convert us to QuickBooks, straighten out our accounting setting, put together all the processes, all the procedures, do all the training, and we just backfill with the people to keep it doing the job after that. So we're not looking, so we're going to pay somebody, we're going to pay a lot of money for somebody to get us all on track. We don't have the resources to recruit a talented enough part-time treasurer to come in and fix our problems. So we're going to hire this professional, fix our problems. The process will be set up She will provide oversight services for a period of the next 6 months, maybe to a year, to check back and make sure everything is staying on track. And then we can, because realistically, the accounting person and a treasurer, if we, for our size budget, our size town, taking the school out of the mix, just for us, neither one of those jobs are a full-time job. Once everything's set up correctly, because then you're just maintaining the system. The problem is we never got, Edmunds is too complicated for us, too heavyweight of a piece of software, and we're not even touching what we could use in it. And no one wants to learn it in order to help us. So that's kind of the quandary. So we have to hire a person to fix us, and then we would need to hire the people based on that person's input of what we need, what kind of resources. And we've had some preliminary discussions with this person to talk about the type of resources that should be in the accounting office. And the treasurer, and this person will bridge us from now until we hire a treasurer. Do you know what I mean? That person will perform some treasury functions for us until we can hire a permanent treasurer. There is kind of a plan in place. And I don't see any other way to get it done because we have to fix the problems first. And then train the people, new people to do the job and keep it afloat. Does anybody have any other questions or comments? All right, now we are on to new business. So, well, really, I did half new business. I told you we're hiring a consultant. When we go into an executive session, I'll give you some more details and we'll talk about that and some more details on there with her contract. Moving on to the draft purchasing
Quick
policy.
question on
Go ahead.
in the executive session, is that required for just discussing a contract?
I wanted us just to have the time as a board to just talk it all through realistically and look at the proposal and get your feedback,
I think unless it's a personnel matter or a legal matter affecting the town, we can get into some issues with FOIA. In open access meetings. Eric, any input on that? I don't remember the exact determination, but unless we're talking about a personnel matter, a legal matter, or some highly sensitive confidential matter, then I think going into executive session may be problematic.
So that is why I listed the executive session specifically to discuss just the contract negotiation portion of it. So we stay out of trouble with FOIA.
Okay,
So as long as the discussion doesn't get too tangential from there, I think it's a safe and legal conversation to have. It
Okay.
can't be the freewheeling, free-ranging discussion of everything under the sun, but you are allowed to discuss pending contracts in executive session.
okay, understood. Yeah, I would be in agreement with that. I think that makes sense. Where it's a competitive thing, where you have competitive bid potentially, or you have some financial thing, yeah.
Good. Any other concerns? Okay, draft purchasing policy. Do you want to share a screen on this and look at this together? How do you guys want to approach it?
Well, I've read through it pretty closely and I don't have, I have two issues with it and I
Have
stated
comments on it.
in my
Right.
email.
Yeah, you emailed me some comments, so I wanted you to give everybody your input.
Yeah, so I have a, a couple of them are just small things, but I have two concerns. One is that if we're going to put a purchasing policy in place that's flexible enough for the town to do its business on a regular basis, I'm not sure that we should cede authority to the Board of Selectmen to allow them to approve deviations from that policy. I think that's the Board of Finance's purview. And we set policy and financial policy for the town. So if we set policy and they have the authority and the sole authority to deviate from that policy and approve deviations from that policy, we're ceding our authority. And I don't think that that's a good precedent to set. And so that's my number one concern with this policy.
So you
My
want
other
to
main-
have exceptions to the policy being a joint approval by the Board of Selectmen and Board of
I think
Finance.
the Board of Finance should approve the deviations. And I think it's fine if we want to have the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen approve the deviations. I would not vote for this policy if it's only the Board of Selectmen approving deviations.
Okay.
My second concern is the preferred vendor clause, because that's not defined anywhere where a preferred what makes a preferred vendor.
I was gonna ask the
That's
same
really-
question.
I'm generally in favor of this kind of thing in order to streamline the process, and we have some preferred vendors that I think have rendered good service to the town. I use preferred small p, not large p, because there's not any list anywhere. That, you know, they've rendered good service to the town. We've got a good working relationship. They trust the town, we trust the vendor. That's good. Those are good, you know, as somebody who's involved and responsible for, you know, millions of dollars of supply chain, I see the value in that. But nowhere in the policy is it defined what the preferred vendor selection process is. So that leaves it wide open. So again, I think that it needs to be either part of the policy, or we need to have a strong document following this policy that defines that process. So we could say something like, you know, the preferred vendor select process. It references a process, but we should say something like as determined by the Board of Finance.
So
I-
I was asking Eric to write a preferred vendor policy about how it would work, how long those contracts with those people would be, who to review them, and think to supplement this. I didn't want that policy inside this policy. I wanted it to be a standalone document, so it could be very flexible as our needs changed, you know what I mean? So,
I'm okay with that as long as it's approved by the Board of Finance, and it states that in this policy that the preferred vendor policy will be reviewed and approved by the Board of Finance.
And we would periodically agree, you know, re-up it. You know, say
Right.
there's I don't know how you would do this, but maybe you have a spreadsheet or something with preferred vendors. Oh, we've had good experience, blah, blah, blah. And Eric would bring it to us periodically,
Yeah.
and we would
Yeah,
bless it.
Diane mentioned a good thing, like how long would a preferred vendor status last? So if we put them in there for
Right,
a
3
year,
years,
Right.
and
5
then at
years.
the end of the fiscal
so
year,
like
we,
every preferred vendor, I envision having some kind of service contract with the town, just like we did with the professional services for the engineer. That's either a 2 or 3 year contract, fixed price, fixed caps, and that would rule that relationship, and it would expire at a certain point in time, and you'd have to re-up and re-review them, add more people.
I think I'll be honest with you, I think that's a lot of work to put
Yeah.
together agreements with each of those vendors, because you don't necessarily know what electrical work you're gonna need or what plumbing work you're gonna need, but you may want a preferred electrician or a preferred plumber. But I think the spirit of what you're suggesting, Diane, is appropriate. You know, if we have somebody who's provided good service and yeah, I think we have to be a little careful with this one, obviously, as I'm raising an issue, but yeah. So anyway, I think it's a good
I-
policy, but as long as we review it and approve it and there's a time limit as you propose, that's a great idea. I think then it makes sense.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up, because it was literally, that was one of the things I flagged too. You know, at my work, we do settlement agreements, and you know, if it's not a defined term, I get hives.
Right.
You know, because then you're almost asking for trouble down the road. So a defined term, reference some other process or document, and then conceptually, I think it's a great idea. But the way it's drafted right now, it's missing that piece. So,
Yeah, and this is really, I was just trying to put out there a framework and then a framework for us to work with the vendors that give the town great service, great pricing, that we kind of have a relationship with.
yeah,
And
conceptually,
what
it's great.
that's defined is, we need to do that. I mean, that's how you define that. And I would be looking to Eric to put something together for us on that.
Right, and then we can kind of play
And
with it and
then we
edit it.
can-
And then my other thought was one of the thresholds. I was just, so you were raising the threshold from 5 to 7,500 for, you know, things that would go underneath this policy. And I'm just wondering, you know, if we, I'm just kind of noodling around on this. Do we want to go to 10 to buy ourselves, you know, to give ourselves some cushion for future, because as prices rise and whatnot. You know, it's just a thought. I'm not weighted to it. I'm not actually even suggesting that. I'm
And
just
these
raising the
thresholds that
issue.
I put in there was like my best guess. It was like a guess. And the only way I was
It's
looking
50%
at it,
increase.
we had 5, and this is really the getting competitive quotes, getting 3 quotes, right? So
Right.
this is allowing us,
We're
Yeah,
looking
and
for
we
flexibility
were
for small
capping it
projects.
at 5, and we had a problem getting things done at 5. So I was going to 7.5.
Right.
Is 10 too much? I don't know. That's a thing that we
Yeah.
can talk about and what we're
Let
comfortable
me
with.
ask this, Eric, you know, in terms of, you know, functionally, what we've actually run into, the times you've brought to us and asked us for exceptions to the program, I can't remember off the top of my head how many were in the 5 to 7.5 and how many were above 7.5. But going forward with prices rising and whatnot, what do you think in terms of the flexibility that would really benefit the town? What do you think it would be a reasonable threshold?
Yeah, I mean, 7,500 for a lot of things is good. I mean, it's just, I mean, I guess I look at it and I say, we have a lot of little projects, you know, in the $5,000 to $10,000 range, you know, that come up. You know, both in the public works realm, you know, in here. I mean, to give you an example, $7,500 probably does not buy you 1 day of paving by a paving contractor, for instance. You know, if we were to do it, you know, we had to go out and replace some guardrail, that's likely to be over $7,500. So an awful lot of things we do on a routine basis are in that range. I mean, even vehicle repairs can easily exceed that. You know, so I guess it just depends on how strict you want to make things. And you know, there's no right or wrong answer, obviously.
No, that's why I'm just sort of
You know.
raising the issue of we're re-upping a policy. We're 5 years down the road from the original policy, right? So it was 2017 that we
Yeah,
originally enacted this.
2017 was the last date. Yeah.
Yep.
So you know what? Here, you know, I'm just wondering if I just plugged into the inflation calculator, you know,
Think
CPI
about 7,000 to 10,000 though.
in 2017 dollars
Right.
in 2022, right? So I'm just trying to give us flexibility so that 2 years from now, we're not already kind of out of date. That's why I'm raising it. And it's a gut feel thing. I don't really know. I just thought I'd bring it up.
I looked at a
One
lot
of
of
the things
other
that occurred.
towns' policies, and Eric sent a lot of them. There's very few towns that are over $5,000.
Oh, okay. That's interesting.
Bids. Now, are they happy with that? I don't know. It's just what you can find on their websites and what they have published, you know what I mean? But a lot of towns seem to have some kind of preferential list or preferred. I see like the bigger projects that would go over 7,500 to 10,000, say if it was an electrical thing, if we had or HVAC thing or something, if we had a preferred vendor, that would solve that problem because we would have a go-to person for that.
You're
We
right.
wouldn't have to go
That's a key carve out, I guess. Yeah. And you know, I plugged it in the inflation calculator and yeah, it's just shy of 6K. If you take 2017 dollars. So you're increasing it beyond that. So maybe 10's too much. Okay.
No, I mean, who's to say what the right number is? I mean, we could try 7,500. If we don't like it, we can always amend it in a year if it doesn't work for us or something.
That's true.
I mean,
That's true. It's not like we can't come back to this. Fair enough.
Right.
a working document.
There you have to be a year. It could be 6 months or 3
It
months.
could be-
Right,
we could
what
say,
if-
"Oh my God, why did we do that?" And we could rethink this and say, what were we thinking?
It's a great starting point. Yeah. You know,
Yeah.
It's really well done in terms of the scope and comprehensive. So it's a great start.
The only other thing I'd mention, and this is super minor, is that when I downloaded the Word document and accepted all changes, there's some formatting stuff you're gonna see when you do
Oh,
that.
yeah,
Some spacing and things,
yes.
but
It's
that's
very
pretty
hard to keep
minor.
track of that. So the questions I'm having is, okay, so. All right, so no one has any problem. So the big things is, I agree with you, Mark. I think, if everybody feels strongly, I'll modify this to have exceptions be a joint approval of the Board of Selectmen. and
I agree
Board.
with that too. Yes.
What do you
At a
think?
minimum,
So,
actually, I think
at a
Mark's right. I
minimum?
mean, what Mark said was it should be us. And if we want to include the Board of Finance, Selectmen rather, that's good too, fine.
But
But
I don't, so this is my concern. I don't want people coming to the Board of Finance to approve something that a project that the Board of Selectmen haven't bought into.
then joint approval.
Eric, you-
Joint
you're
approval
gonna
should take
make
care
a
of that, right?
comment there.
Right, so I think of them as the governing body, as giving the directions for the projects in town. We control the purse strings, but, I don't want to approve something that they're not in agreement that should be done.
That I think joint approval is appropriate. I think
That's how I'm thinking of it. I could be wrong, so I'm just, that's kind of
No,
how I'm thinking of it.
I think you're right about that. That's fair. It's
Well,
just,
remember, yeah, I don't disagree, but we're not approving purchases. What we're doing here is approving deviations from the purchase for a reasonable cost. So it's a
Right.
small,
Right. But I'm assuming, like, any purchasing policy, it's got to be approved by the Board of Selectmen to spend the money, and we have to then
Yeah.
be the second layer, right? I mean,
right. I mean, when we varied before, I'm pretty sure it was a joint, both boards agreed, and that's the way it should be. I think it should be both board. I really do.
yeah, and again, we
And,
can
you
always
know,
change this if it ends up being too onerous, because part of the problem we have is, if Eric needs to get something done and the Board of Selectmen just met yesterday, and then, we're meeting in a
month.
week, then we give our approval, but it's gonna be another month before the Board of Selectmen meets, so it's just something we have to be careful about.
any other, so the thought process on the preferred vendor, that was my caveat of providing some kind of exception in the policy for someone we know and that we work with all the time, so we don't have to jump through hoops and get 3 quotes all the time when we know we're going to give it to this guy anyways. And if everybody agrees that Eric needs to write that policy, we need to.
I still think we need to add a clause that says, the formal vendor process as approved by the Board of Finance.
Okay,
Yeah, that makes sense because
approved by the Board of Finance, okay.
right, because
I'll
it's a
make that sense.
subsidiary of the purchasing policy and this is your purchasing policy.
All right.
First, I'd rather really have the process in here, but I understand if we don't want to muddy it up and take the time to do it right now. But I think we need to make sure that we state clearly that we have the approval authority over that process.
Approved by the Board of Finance,
I
okay.
mean, maybe ideally, once we get this thing written, once we get this thing drafted up and we're happy with it, we put it as, attachment 1,
Yeah.
to the purchasing policy. So it's right
Yeah.
there.
Yeah,
Right,
that's a good
right.
point, Rob.
Right.
That's a good idea. Yeah.
Yeah, I could say Exhibit A or, whatever.
Yeah, Exhibit A, exactly.
Yeah,
So it's
something.
right there,
Oh,
you're
yeah,
not
yes.
referencing another thing that somebody has to go out and find. But yeah, I agree, again, undefined terms give me hives.
One other significant change that I made in this, the wording for getting bids was for any contracted services. It didn't have a dollar threshold, and I made it contractors of $5,000 or greater to put a dollar to it, because before it was anything.
Yeah, I
Right.
think any would be too restrictive. Yeah, I
Right.
think I agree with that change.
The whole part of the purpose of this is to loosen this up a little bit to give Eric some flexibility. So I agree. with
Yeah,
that.
but define it. I
Right, I mean,
actually
we
have
went out-
one. Go ahead, Eric.
I was gonna say, in the past, we've gone out and solicited multiple bids, for service contracts that were $60 a month, you know? Probably not something you want to be spending, weeks, tracking down multiple vendors, and so, yeah, I agree that there should be some threshold on the capital purchase and the contracted services. And that's fine by me.
I did have one other concern that I really need to think about. So under Part 3, public bidding applicability, we have exceptions listed there in a bullet point, such as those furnished by a monopoly utility. Yeah, we're going to use Eversource. Those requiring a single source of supply. If you've got to get a part from a dealer, you got to get a part from a dealer, right? But I think the 5th bullet point down says those providing professional consulting or technical services such as architectural engineering, planning, medical, accounting, data processing, legal, personnel, or management services. I have some concern over not going to bid for things like engineering services. If it, maybe we could state
So-
something.
So that was in the existing policy, so that would be making it more restrictive. That was in the existing policy as it stood now.
So can I make a suggestion, Mark, that maybe could get around that? The
Yep.
reason why that's typically in policies like this is that a lot of professional organizations have prohibitions against RFPs. But in that case, what you would do is you would ask for request for qualifications for the firms and judge the firms on qualifications, not necessarily price for a specific project, if that
So-
makes sense.
This section, these exceptions carve out on this, it only applies to the public bidding process, the true formal submission of it. But it still would fall into requiring to get quotes if it met the dollar threshold. It's very complicated the way it's written. Do you know what I mean? It just
Yeah,
does not flow.
Yeah, I see the
And I
distinction.
didn't want to start from scratch.
But I mean, something like engineering services, or architectural services, you don't necessarily want to be bidding on cost. You want to be bidding on, there's a lot of things that go into that, is how I would put it.
Absolutely, but that should be the approach to any purchase being made. It's like, what's the best interest of the town? You have to balance cost, lead time, speed to completion and quality of the work, right? So, yeah, it just seems like a pretty wide open loophole. So that basically, if I'm reading this correctly,
Following supplies, materials, services, or construction, and I put do not require public bidding, meaning the sealed bid process, the true RFP, wait 21 days, open the sealed envelopes, review, but they would still require quotes if it met the dollar thresholds for the quotes and a review of a qualified contractor and awarding of, the job to
Correct.
someone.
Perhaps that last bit should be in the text. Just to clarify it, so that it's clear that, because you were explaining it
yeah,
now.
I think that there's a logic exclusion here though, because back up on the first page, I guess the second page, it says a minimum of 3 responsive quote bids shall be obtained for purchases in excess of 7,500 but less than 15,000. Exceptions to the minimum of 3 quotes can be made for a town approved vendor. Capital purchases value of 5,000 or greater require public bidding, but then you've accepted that segment, but there isn't a provision made for those for going out to quote, because it only states that you're between 7,500 and 15,000, you have to go.
And
Oh.
maybe this is And Rob had a good point about defined terms, because we don't have a lot of defined terms in here, and that's where the confusion, I think, comes in here.
Or maybe
Yeah.
you say that for these services, you say, 3 quotes must be obtained.
I was gonna
As-
ask,
as-
the
as-
above 15K, is that just subject to a blanket, of course we have to bid that?
Yes, above 15K to me is a CIP kind of deal.
Okay, so when I read that opening paragraph like 3 times and was confused, and then I decided that it was my problem.
Oh,
But I'm now
It's hard to
thinking that
understand.
perhaps it's unclear the way it's written. It almost seems like, above 15K, it's not clear. To me, maybe we should just clarify that paragraph a little bit and say that, above 15,000, these rules apply and there are no variances. Isn't that the point? That's the
Right.
real,
So again, you come to the only defined term we have in this document right now is a capital purchase.
right.
And a capital purchase, requires public bidding, period.
0 carve outs.
With the carve outs of those applicability things, the things we were just talking about,
Right. Sorry. Mhm.
those
But it
items.
doesn't, then it doesn't, there's not an applicability for the 3 bids because
But then the 3 bids comes in somewhere else. Hold on, I'm just.
yeah,
trying-
but again, the problem is it said between 7,500 and 15,000, you need to get the 3 bids.
Yeah, I honestly think it's a little confusing the way it's.
Actually-
It is confusing because we have 2 things. We have quotes and public bidding. You know what I mean? So there's 2 parts of this policy. And when you throw yourself into the public bidding, you gotta do the full-blown public bidding. And then we're trying to do a carve out. So that would be, it's in
you might-
page 2. Competitive public bidding and request for quotes. That's why I put request for quotes in that there. So it's saying a minimum of 3 responsive quote bids shall be obtained for purchases in excess of 7,500, but less than 15,000. Exceptions to the minimum requirement for 3 quotes can be made for a service provided by a town preferred vendor. Then
Right, which we-
capital purchases and contracts of a value of $5 require public bidding. So
Yeah,
I
maybe
think
I
the
need to
problem there
define
is
those
that
terms better.
less than 15,000, I don't know.
I'm a little confused. So if everything over 15K is considered capital, is
Yep.
that
It's
then-
considered a capital purchase by the definition.
then the line about capital purchases over 5K is confusing. This is where I keep getting stuck.
It
Is
says
is
or contracted services. Contracted services with a value of 5,000 or greater.
Right,
Yeah.
so capital purchases is anything over $15,000 by definition. I can define these better
okay,
if you want to have
Yeah.
more definitions.
and I don't want to make you do that while you have a raging headache.
If I had my way, I would rewrite this whole thing because we have 2 ways of getting bids. We have the true public thing and what should be the thresholds, and then the quotes for the smaller stuff. And then a preferred vendor. We have 3 buckets that we're trying to address.
I'm also a
Right, and
little,
then-
yeah, go ahead.
Go on, don't go on.
'Cause I'm also a little concerned about the use of the word capital, because typically a capital expenditure is anything that's going to be turned into an asset, right? It doesn't necessarily mean just a large expenditure.
Right,
not
it's not the
counting, so-
accounting defined capital. I think I'm using that definition as a town defined, what we consider. When I think capital purchases big enough that you have to have CIP involved in public bidding from us.
Well, we generally only have Eric, correct me if I'm wrong, CIP is really going to look at capital assets like, equipment, buildings, et
This
cetera.
policy has everything over 15K going CIP.
Do they? Okay.
That's how before, the existing policy was 5,000. No, it was still 15. I didn't change to 15. So that's
Okay.
how it was before.
All right. Yeah, well, let's not fuck with it. We need to be internally consistent at least. I find it a little odd.
Yeah, I respect your decision to not try to reinvent the wheel. I get
I'm
it.
gonna try and I want to clean this up for you because I want you guys to see a cleaned up version. So I want to clean this up for you.
Yeah, I think we got a lot of input here, so maybe we take
Right.
another run at it. And
Right,
So
Yeah, and again, I don't want to belabor this, especially when you're hurting. So I think we've raised some points and
So I'm gonna
let's come back
add
to it
the-
next time.
I'm gonna recap. I'm gonna add the Board of Finance and Board of Select approval for exceptions. I'm gonna add Board of Finance approval for a preferred vendor.
Yep.
Do you want me to get into more detail about what's a quote versus a public bid? Do some
I think
defined
it needs to be
terms?
made a little more clear on that, yeah. To me, it
Do you have
wasn't
a
clear.
problem if I stick it in that definitions box? And
Yeah,
put,
the main problem was that there's exceptions under the public bidding. It wasn't clear that they needed to roll back to the 3 bid process.
right, and this is a hard policy. The way it was written, it has this like introduction, second, and applicability, and then it goes into one thing, and then it goes into the whole. If it's this, parts 3, 4, and 5 apply. If it's not, you don't, you know?
Right. No, I hear you. I
it's a hard
think
policy
adding
to follow.
definitions is good. I think anytime for just ease of reading, just a random suggestion I have is if we have a defined term, might maybe bold it in the text, or otherwise denote it somehow so that we know that that's a defined term and to look for it. That's just a minor issue. That
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm trying to make the defined term a capital, but I can bold it as well.
No, either
So,
one, whatever you do, as long as
I'll make it match
consistent through the
whatever we
document.
put the
Yeah.
text in the definition, so it
Mhm.
sticks out.
Yeah, so it pops a little bit. That's
Yeah,
all.
so it pops, that's fine.
But yeah, I mean, why don't, yeah, those are pretty much what
The
we
only other
discussed.
change I want to point out to you that I made was supervision of a project. It's on, I think, the last page, applicability. Provisions of this part to all purchase subjects upon her projects with a contracted value of more than 75,000. A qualified inspector must be hired or qualified volunteer must be appointed by appropriate. I changed from 50 to 75 because I thought 50 was low. I don't know how you
Yep,
guys
that
feel.
makes sense.
Yeah, it's a similar, it's proportionally the same as the other change you made, right? I
Yep.
think that makes sense. I don't have a problem with it.
So while we're talking about that, can we insert the word after it says or a qualified volunteer, put or employee? Because I think in a lot of cases, the best person to be
Public Works.
supervising these things is the public works
Yep.
supervisor. Certainly if we're doing an asphalt project, he's going to be sitting there. Now, we may also be hiring, say, materials testing lab to do density testing, but the overall inspection is usually going to be the public works supervisor.
Yeah, that seems
Yeah, I
reasonable to me.
think qualified volunteer, qualified employee or volunteer or something like that. You could have both.
I
Make it
mean,
open.
Okay.
you could just say qualified person, but I don't know, maybe that's too broad.
I'm guessing that volunteer was used because that was in the original policy because we didn't want to pay somebody to do it.
But we're
Yeah,
already
sure.
paying an employee.
So, yeah, I can make that change. We'll tweak that. It's just that we have to really make sure that that employee is truly appointed for that and that they know their name is on the hook for it. Because we're saying we're gonna have a project of a certain value, we're gonna have additional oversight, do you know what I mean? So,
Right. But I guess, is there so if I'm that employee and you tell me that there's this project and you want me to opine upon it as an expert, what's the catch, I guess, is what you're referring to here?
but we're asking that person to ensure the performance of the work conforms to the contract documents. So we're asking somebody to make sure that they're doing the job right, correctly.
Right. And I just want
So
to make
it's
sure
not
like
just-
there's
yeah,
no
it's not just
issue
like
here
they're
with
putting the
us.
pavement down. Yeah, they're doing a good job putting the pavement down the way we want
I
it.
mean, I would hope that that would all work out, like that would be all acceptable. I'm just wondering.
I'll
Uh,
just give you an example for the community center. We're having Adrian and Scott Person
Yeah.
be two co-people to manage that project. Because of both bring things to the table.
Yep. Last time I ran into Adrian, he mentioned that.
So,
It seems like.
and that's why I'm thinking, I didn't know if it should be higher. So part of me was saying, should it be higher? I'm just thinking of something,
No,
This
the
person
number, the
who's re-
threshold looks right.
okay, all right.
I think it's right. And again, it's commensurate with your other increases. I think that makes sense. Right? Going 5 to
I
7
can
and a
have
half. with 50
employee, I just want, from my point of view, I just want that employee to know that it's more than just, it's a little bit more than just doing their everyday job. They have to make sure it's right. Do you know what I mean?
And if you ask them to do a little bit more than their every job, the reason I guess I'm bringing this up is these are union employees, right?
So look, it's either gonna be a public works foreman or the
Mhm.
public works supervisor. He's a salaried employee.
Yep.
Or myself. Or in all likelihood, we're gonna hire for some projects, we hire a clerk of the works to
Right.
oversee it.
Okay. Okay, I'm
Yeah,
just
it's gonna be, I'm.
Go ahead.
So
What I was gonna say is that it seems like it should be some kind of manager or supervisor, because with the way it's written. That was my 2 cents in this whole thing. I've been listening to the thing, but that's a pretty big ask, making sure something's correct for that much money, that's all. Seems like it should be a manager. or
So let
something.
me wordsmith that a little bit and come back
Yeah,
to you.
that's all, that's my.
I love it. Let's do that.
That, so I got those changes. Anything else you guys want to see that we should be addressing that? I know it's not the best flowing policy. It's hard to work with without scrapping the whole thing and starting over. I'm going to tell you, I found the Hebrans purchasing policy on their website, and it is like a 50-page book, and it is really good.
50 pages.
We could like plagiarize that. So that's a big rewrite. You know, we don't need 50 pages, but there's a lot of good tidbits of information in there.
Well, I mean, not for nothing, but I for one am all for learning from others.
Right. It was a pretty well thought out comprehensive, because they have like a preferred vendor program, but it's based on vendors located in their town and things like that. So they have.
Oh, well, they're also encouraging, support local business then.
Right. So they had some interesting things in there when I was reading through it. I'm saying, oh, that's a good idea. Oh, that's a good idea. But
That's
that's a bigger rewrite.
mm,
That could be a future thing to look at.
So Diane, I sent you a copy of, sorry.
good.
Okay, I sent you a copy of my suggestions. I don't know if
Yep.
you've gone through those. I had a couple of things I wanted to add in the public bid documents shall include. Just things that we've gotten tripped up in the last couple of years on bids we put out. I would specifically call out in the bid document that we've got to meet the Commission on Human Rights and Opportunities official language. Because we've had to put out addenda twice now over the last 3 years to correct bids where I didn't think we were responsible to the CHRO, and they told us explicitly that we weren't. And it just means setting out right in the RFP what our requirements are going to be in terms of percentage of the project that has to go to certified small and minority owned businesses. And then certified minority women and disabled owned businesses. Because that's something that, the contractor has to know upfront what his requirements are, because that affects how they bid the job.
So
The
that
second,
wouldn't be located in any one of these documents. It wouldn't be in our instructions to bidders or our sample service contract or anything like that.
I mean,
I'm just asking the question. I don't know the answer to that.
yeah, I think that's typically a separate, I mean, I want to put it in the policy just as a reminder to myself or whoever else is writing RFPs, that they've got to make that explicit in the RFP, so we don't cause ourselves problems later. And the other thing I think we have to do is we have to set out in the RFP each time, whether it's a prevailing wage job or not. Because there's also been a couple of jobs where I've gotten that question partway through, you know, and some contractors assumed they were having to bid it at prevailing wages, and other contractors didn't. And now you're, you know, that's not really fair to the contractors. And it may ultimately get the town in hot water if they don't do it. And if it's a grant funded or grant supported. So that's that. The other thing I thought that we have never done is we've never required them to give us two separate envelopes, one with the technical components, one with the cost components. It should all come in one envelope. And what we should require is one hard copy and one electronic copy, so we can send it to people in PDF form. That's normally what we've been asking contractors the last year or two, especially on bigger projects. So we don't get, 50, bound copies, novellas. Most people today read the things on their computers anyway. So that's the cleanest way to do it. The other thing I would suggest is that the bid opening should be done by me, not the town clerk. And the reason is, in the past, a couple of times it's been done by the town clerk, but the town clerk doesn't necessarily, like, if it's bids for a paving job, she's not necessarily even gonna know what the important things to record on the bid sheet are from reading through them. So it's gotta be somebody more technically literate. So that would be my suggestion. I don't personally think you need two witnesses. I think if it's the administrator and a witness, that's fine. And you don't require three people at all the bid openings, but if you want to keep that in,
So you want the receipt and unsealing of bids to be received by the town administrator's office will be considered responsive and complete. Bids must be opened, okay, by the town administrator. So you want to change town clerk to town administrator.
yeah, I want them to come to the town clerk's office because that's where they should all be stored in the vault until we're ready, signed for and stored in the vault until we're ready.
Now, you have to
open it.
publish a delivery location and a time to unseal bids. in
Correct,
Your instructions anyway, so that's gonna be in there, right?
correct.
Okay.
So I would just change that from town clerk to town administrator or their designee for the bid opening. And again, as we talked about it, I think most of the time when we're giving people stuff for bid evaluations, we're giving it to them in electronic form, not hard copy form. So requiring 7. This calls out, you gotta basically have 7 individually sealed bids that you give out to each person or all 5 people evaluating or whatever. And the problem is that when you do that, how do you know that the company sealed the same exact bid package in each of the 5 packages? It's much cleaner to do an electronic copy and distribute that.
Are you talking about distribution of bids? Unsealed bids
Yeah.
must be distributed to each member, but it doesn't say how, it leaves it wide open.
It says
Doesn't say whether-
unsealed bids must be
Doesn't say whether they're
distributed to
doing
each
paper.
member of the evaluating body.
But it's silent, so it gives us an option to do it either way.
Well, I mean, what you have listed there now says unsealed bids must be distributed to each member of the evaluating body.
Right, within 7 calendar days of the bid opening.
Right,
So
that implies,
that could be paper, that could be carrier pigeon. I mean, it's silent, so it's silent to the method of distributing. It doesn't say how we distribute, it just says we have to distribute them.
how can you seal an electronic?
It says unsealed must be distributed to each member of the ballot body. Members must report indications of tampering with the bids. The town clerk's tampering, you could tamper with an electronic document. Somebody was crossing out and stuff, do you know what I mean? So I think you still have to, tampering doesn't mean that the envelope's not sealed. Tampering could be anything to do with the document. Do you know what I mean? Something.
Like I said, that would be how I
And
would write it.
I would prefer, yes, I'm assuming everybody does everything electronically with this stuff, you know? But I don't want to commit to one method. This leaves it wide open so we could adapt as we go. What if you had somebody on a committee who doesn't have a computer and they want paper? You'd have to give them paper, right? To review
Okay.
it. So that's just. So I'm okay with that because it's silent to the method, and then we could do whatever we want. It gives us more flexibility. Anything else, Eric, that you needed to add? I'll take all that, and make all those changes. And still
Yeah,
have
the
it-
only other thing that, there's a hard cutoff that says, only bids that are complete and responsive would be evaluated. It is very common to get a bid that is missing something. I mean,
You have to
because,
define what complete and responsive is then, if you want to put.
right, so I would insert language that says, in the case that a bid is missing something that's required for compliance, but not technical specifications or cost, the committee may elect to evaluate. That way, if they didn't send you their insurance documents, you don't reject a bid, because I would reject most sealed bids. If every single thing on our checklist, was mandatory before we'd even look at it. Those are the kinds of things you go back to the contractor and said, yeah, this is the contractor we're gonna pick. And you say, hey, you still haven't sent us this, this, and this. And then when they send it, then you go farther in the process. That would be my take on it.
All right, and you have that in your email that you sent to me, right? I remember.
Correct.
Right.
And then the only other thing I wanted to talk to you guys about is that you do have a thing in there that basically says, generally speaking, you're supposed to take the lowest bid. However, there's a procedure there if you're not going to select the lowest bidder. And what I would say is that you put a caveat in there that says if the bids are within 5% of the total cost, the evaluating body shall consider other factors in the evaluation. Just that, if you've got a widespread, like for instance, we did the large paving job. We had bids come in from somewhere between about 400,000 to a high of 675,000. That's a huge spread. Unless the lowest, the lowest bidder was $120,000 lower than the next bid. As long as they're qualified, we're going to pick them every time. But if you've got a bid that's $57,000 and another bid that's $58,000, I'm preferentially going to go with the vendor that I have the most confidence in. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's appropriate. Usually I've seen in a lot of RFP language that I've had to actually respond to is, it's like we reserve the right to select the vendor or the project or the proposals in the best interest of the governing body, so.
We have to
it's kind
put
of
in a
broad
caveat,
thing.
that it's our sole discretion. We have to put some more legalese into that. Because you don't want to get into a trouble picking the wrong person and having somebody complain. Got to make it clear. That's where I'm saying I saw that good language in Hebron's policy. So maybe I'll pick something from there. They
Okay.
had, and I think Columbia had some good stuff in theirs too. that I saw. All right,
Yeah, and then the only other thing is you have in your definition of evaluating body, it states a minimum of 5 town electors. Um, You know,
what page is that on? Can you?
let's see.
Oh,
that
evaluate,
is
the Board
on
of Selectmen
page-
shall establish an evaluating body for all public bids. Shall be
Right.
within the discretion of the Board of Selectmen to designate a committee to evaluate every for the fiscal year. Or to designate individual committees for each public, however, the committee responsible for, yeah. So that's only if they have to establish a committee. Right?
Right, but I guess one of the things I would say is you can't necessarily assume that the town administrator is always gonna be an elector. And you can't assume the public works foreman is gonna be an elector. And for an awful lot of projects we do, you sure as heck are gonna want either myself or him on the evaluating committee. Like I wouldn't take 5 random electors, and try to figure out and do a good job of choosing a vendor for a complex paving problem.
So I guess I'm looking at this and maybe I'm reading this wrong. I'm thinking the Board of Selectmen has a way to choose it. They don't have to form a committee. They can give it to CIP or let's see, it shall be the discretion of the Board of Selectmen to designate a committee to evaluate a public for the fiscal year, or to designate individual committees for each public bid. However, the committee responsible for each public bid shall consist of a minimum of 5 electors. Okay.
Right, so anybody that's not an elector, so let's say, for instance, we were looking.
Elector means you can
bridge-
vote in the town of Andover. Is that the definition of elector?
Yeah, yeah.
Right. So I'll give you an obvious example. If when we start bidding projects out for major culvert repair, our town engineer really needs to be on the board doing the selection, the project selection. He's unlikely to be a town elector. The public works foreman is not, or supervisor is not a town elector. So anytime we bring in an outside professional, they're not, unless they're already a town resident, per this policy, they're not allowed to sit on any evaluation panel. And
Have
that
we
I
ever
think is
done
wrong.
this? Have we
What?
ever done this? Have we ever done this, what we said in this policy?
No, we don't, frankly.
That was the policy we don't follow. Okay.
Well,
Because most of the big bids are reviewed by CIP or some group of people, right? That are qualified within the town. We don't
sometimes,
ever,
I mean, a lot of times it's me and Jay sitting down and going over them, making a decision. And then going to the Board of Selectmen and saying, here's the decision we recommended, here's why. And, they say, okay, you can go, do this or hire them. Right? From a practical standpoint, that's how it actually happens most of the time. They're not impaneling 5 people and all evaluating. Maybe we should be, and clearly we should have been per the policy. We've never really done that.
Right.
Other than maybe
I think-
really the Board of Selectmen is
I think
acting
it's
as that
designed
body.
to take it out of the hands. Yes, like people like you and Jay should have input, but you shouldn't be the sole decision makers on a large project because they want to keep that independence outside of the people with the vested interest in the project and
Sure.
giving bids to their favorite people, so to speak, right? So what should the
Yeah.
number be? I mean, and they're saying maybe 5 electors is too many, but what is the right number? Obviously, they want town people on the committee because they're vested into the interests of the town, right? Then you're gonna have your cadres of professionals that you need to help guide you through some technical stuff.
I mean, the way this is written, what will probably happen is, when the evaluation is being done, then I guess you could have whoever your technical consultant is, or the public works foreman there to give advice and make suggestions, but then he doesn't get a vote in the final outcome. If that's the way you want to do it, that's how this would work, I would think.
I'm just trying to think how to craft this to make it work, to get the input for large projects and independence. And then you do need the technical people, you do need the people, do you know what I mean? So maybe the problem we have is saying a minimum of 5 electors.
What if you put 3 electors, at least 3? And then the town would at least have a majority of the group of 5.
You said a minimum of 5 individuals, at least 3 of
Most
them
of the
have to be
policies that
electors.
I looked at, a lot of towns didn't set out the minimum requirements for the evaluating body. I think they have very fluffy language around it saying that they're going to have qualified people evaluate, blah, 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 but they don't commit to anything. Yeah. I agree, 5 electors would be hard to get 5 electors on any committee. We can't get anybody to serve on any committees for anything anymore. So, I mean. So let me do a takeaway on that and see what I can wordsmith on that and come back to you guys. Maybe like it is, like Linda says, it's 3. Maybe say 3 electors and then member of the Board of Finance, member of the Board of Selectmen, right?
Or just at least 3 electors.
Right. Don't have a
But be
minimum.
sure there's a member from the Board of Finance and then you probably have all your bases covered.
Yeah. All right, let me just take a look at that. Anything else, Eric?
No, those were my kind of major comments on the process.
This will take me several weeks to do, you guys. So,
Whether I had anything else. Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult, and you're balancing the public interest with expediency, and that's a hard thing to do. In trying to prevent abuse of the system, but not get in the way of progress. So it's a fine line to walk. There's no question.
and you know what? This is a living, breathing policy. It's up to us to keep it updated as we, it hasn't been looked at in a long time. So, we may not get it right out the gate, but there's nothing to say, like you said, Mark, that we don't look at it 6 from now and say, what were we thinking?
Yeah, and maybe the next time it's a quick, tighten up of 2 paragraphs rather than, hitting all these points.
Yeah.
No, let's definitely advance the ball. I really appreciate your work on it, Diane, by the way. And apologies for I didn't provide you with any redlining myself. I just kind of came out of this call and
No,
talked
I
about it, but-
wanted to get input from, because the charter says we work in collaboration with the Board of Selectmen and CIP, because the charter specifies that out. I wanted everybody, I didn't expect you guys to redline it because I think we are going to be the final people to wordsmith it all and decide what we like based on everybody's input.
Mhm.
Nobody from CIP other than you, Rob. And Eric Cerisley did respond to me and say he had nothing. So, but that's it.
Yeah, I pointed out, in an email to the CIP members, because there was a discussion about whether we were even having a meeting this month, and I said, hey, Diane's got this purchase policy revision, so they're aware of it. Anyway, thanks for your work. I agree. I think we've talked this out. I think it's time for a revision, and then we can come back to it. This isn't,
Yep. Work in progress.
tomorrow, right? We're getting there.
So I will commit to getting this done so we can get it, at a memo into our next meeting to, discuss.
Awesome.
And hopefully we'll be happy with it, but you know what?
You know,
Been this way
there'll
since
always be something.
2017. Let's go another month, so I'll get
The-
that done.
The beauty of drafting a document in a group. I've been there.
Yes. That's how you get good input, so everybody
No,
brings
it
something. to the
is.
table.
It's, you know, this is good stuff and we needed to do it. So
Okay, anything else said on this? I'm gonna move on. All right, next on the agenda is approval of the minutes for
I wasn't there, so I'll recuse.
August 24th. And I just lost my package.
Should be page 36 of the packet.
If I can have a motion for that.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from Wednesday, August 24th, 2022.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Rob, you
Abstain because I wasn't there.
abstain, okay. 4 yeses, 1 abstain. Rob, okay. All right, liaison reports. I don't have anything, I just kind of told you on the community center and Eric did, you know, the RFP is gonna go out shortly for the build design phase. And then the Board of Selectmen has appointed 2 people to be the project oversighters, or co-chairs on that. I have.
I don't have anything. I don't think CIP met. So there's nothing to discuss. Eric, I'm not wrong about that, right?
Nope,
I'm
you're
a
not
little
wrong about
fuzzy of
that.
late. So yeah, there's nothing going on there.
Anybody else? All right, open board discussion. Does anybody have anything they want to bring up? Any concern? Okay, public speak. The only thing I see on there is an iPhone and I don't know who that is. There's no phone number, there's no name.
Well, I think you're given the opportunity.
Okay, hearing nothing, we'll move on. Let's move into executive session. So here's a point I want to know. Can we adjourn this meeting and then just do executive session?
No. You have to go
Why?
into executive session and then come out of executive session, then make a motion to adjourn. That's how it has to be done technically. However, you
I
don't
think
record.
technically we need a motion to move into executive session, so I'll make the motion to move into executive session to do the contract negotiation.
I will second that motion.
Okay, and then the only other thing you have to put in that motion is if you're going to admit anybody other than board members, i.e. myself, if you so choose, you have to state that in the motion.
So I move we go into executive session to discuss the contract negotiation for the accounting and financial assistance, and that we admit Eric Anderson, town administrator, to that executive session.
And I second that amended motion.
Diana couldn't hear you.
All in favor?
No, aye.
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 Aye.